Welcome back to the workshop. In today's video, I'm going to be making a new version of this etagere. This is a past project of mine, and the client wanted a new, larger version for either a bookcase or a drinks cabinet. Now, an etagere is a piece of furniture with open shelves, traditionally used for displaying ornaments. But in this case, with this new large version, the bottom shelf is going to be enclosed. It's going to have two doors on the front, and that's going to hold all the drinks, and the shelves above will hold all the glasses. The cabinet is made from birch plywood with American black walnut constructional veneer and American black walnut solid wood. For this design, I had to veneer it as the legs were really airy and lightweight, and the enclosed section on the bottom had panels going in different directions, so it wouldn't really be possible in solid wood as there would be too much movement to contend with. I decided to cut all the panels in one go. Even though I'm using some of them later on in the project, it's a lot quicker while I got the vacuum bag set up for the veneering to veneer all the panels at the beginning of the project, so I don't need to do it later on. All the panels that would have an exposed edge at the end of the build I lipped with walnut and then sanded that back before veneering. I spent a bit of time looking for the perfect bundle of walnut veneer for this project. Since the width of the shelves are 33 centimeters wide, I wanted to cover the full width of the shelf with one sheet of veneer. Wider sheets of veneer are usually a lot more expensive than smaller widths, but I find it more cost effective buying those packs because the time it saves is considerable. You first would have to cut a straight edge on the veneer and then possibly shoot the edge on a planer or a shooting board to get a perfectly jointed surface. And then you'd have to veneer tape two or more sheets together to get the full width. And not only does it take more time doing it that way, it also doesn't look as nice. Having a shelf made from one full width of veneer gives the impression of a solid piece of wood because there is no join or separation in the grain. Regular viewers of the channel will know I use my vacuum bag regularly in the furniture I make. I honestly think it is a fantastic tool, and for people who can't fit a large hydraulic press in their workshop, I think a vacuum bag is the perfect option. Now, I've actually heard people say vacuum bags are not strong and don't veneer well, but honestly, I think they've never used a vacuum bag. The amount of pressure they produce is immense. They actually produce 8.5 tons of pressure per meter squared, which is more than enough pressure to press veneer down onto a board and even curve veneer around a mold for a bend lamination. Now, there are wrong and right ways of using a vacuum bag press. Some methods give you more even clamping pressure, and some other ways can damage the bag and not even completely flatten the veneer. One thing you'll always see me doing is adding a scrap board on the top and bottom of the piece being veneered. This helps the veneer completely flatten onto the substrate. If you just let the bag do that, there's a chance where there's wrinkles in the bag, the veneer will bubble up. Another thing I often do is wrap the veneered board in cling film or baking paper. I learnt this the hard way when starting out. I just put an unprotected panel into the vacuum bag with a board on either side, and basically the whole thing glued together, and I had a big sandwich at the end of it. Because there's often glue squeeze out, whether it be from the side of the panel or glue actually seeping through the pores of the wood. So you definitely need a layer of protection. That can be baking paper or cling film, and that will just stop the glued panel from sticking to your sacrificial board. So yeah, I do use the vacuum bag a lot, and I also use the Festool domino a lot. However, in this project, I did not use the Festool domino once. I used a method that I very rarely use, which is tongue and groove. Well, to be more accurate, it's probably groove and floating tongue. About 90% of this project is joined together with a tongue and groove. For example, around the shelves, I cut a groove all the way around the shelf, and the rails also have a long groove cut in them, and I joined them both together with a floating tongue. So it's a bit of a mixture between a floating tenon and a tongue and groove joint, just because of how long the groove is. This design perfectly lends itself to this kind of joinery, as the shelf is quite thin, and I can attach the legs and the rails onto the shelf with the same joint and groove. When cutting the grooves for this project, it had to be extremely accurate. So when I set up the fence on the table saw, I ran all the components through at the same time. I cut a groove all the way around the shelves and the rails with the fence set at the same location. This meant when I glued the rails onto the shelf, they would be completely flush on the bottom and the reveal would be the same. And likewise with the legs, once I had the fence set up, I cut all 4 legs at the same time, so there was no discrepancy in height of the groove. Now, I don't want to take credit for the design of these legs because this was a design the client sent me from a traditional piece of furniture. I really love how the legs make the piece look really light and airy. They don't take up a lot of material, and the way the legs are constructed in an L shape at a right angle means that the leg is really strong and rigid and there is no flex or bending. So even though the shelves with the rails on are very heavy, because of the design of the leg and how they wrap around each corner of the shelf, means you have a really strong and rigid design. To cut the groove, I used a CMT 5mm grooving blade. The width of this blade is only 150mm, and my table saw takes blades up to 250mm. But that isn't an issue because I'm never cutting grooves that large, and even a 150mm blade can fit in the table saw. You just need to raise the blade enough to peek through the table. Once the groove was cut, I planed up all the floating tenon stock. This didn't need to be walnut. This could just be any scrap wood because the floating tenon wouldn't be seen in the end. So I just planed up some random species of wood I had. Once this project was done, I thought of one way that you could really speed up the build time of this project. And that would be, instead of bandsawing out and planing up the tongues from solid wood, I could just cut strips from a 5mm board of plywood and use those as the tenon. It would be just as strong as solid wood and save a ton of time in machining up those tenons. When gluing the unit together, I made sure to apply masking tape on all the joint areas, so when there was squeeze out, I can easily peel away the masking tape and the glue will come with it. This saves a lot of time later on from chiseling and sanding away dried glue on the wood surface. When making this project, I was scratching my head a bit on how I would glue the whole thing together, as it was quite large, and then I thought about strap clamps, and I think this was the perfect choice, as I can glue on all 4 legs at the same time, and they'll all be squeezing into the center of the shelf, meaning I'd get a really tight corner. And even though this was a very large glue up, it actually went very smoothly. The legs slotted in really nicely, and the strap clamps were really quick to tighten. So at the moment, all 4 legs are glued onto the shelves. I'm now cutting the rails to size on the table saw, applying glue into the groove and clamping them in place. As this is quite a tall, narrow unit, there is a chance it's going to wobble when you apply a lot of weight onto the shelves. That's why adding an enclosed storage unit to the bottom of this piece is such a good idea, because not only do I think it's going to look a lot better, it's going to add a substantial amount of weight to the bottom of this piece, preventing it from wobbling if weight is applied to the top shelf. I'm going to be joining these walls in place with glue and screws. There is a lot of glue contact area between the shelves and the leg itself, so I just need to apply screws underneath the piece. I spend a lot of time sanding my furniture. I know a lot of woodworkers don't like sanding, but it is one of those steps that shouldn't be rushed. It really makes a difference between a high quality piece of furniture and a poor quality one. When people see your work for the first time, they immediately touch it, and if all the surfaces don't feel the same, or there's some glue that hasn't been removed and it's then showed up in the finish, the clients will probably notice it and it's not going to look good. So I want my furniture to feel as premium as possible, so I am sanding every surface. every nook and cranny, underneath the piece, at the back of the piece. So from all angles, it looks fantastic and also feels great. And for the handles of the door, I used Axminster Tools Excalibur draw pull cutter. I'm really enjoying using this cutter at the moment. So I put the router bit into the router table. I set a stop on the fence to 180mm. That's how long I wanted the handle to be. And I ran the door along the fence and the router bit did all the work. I had to push the fence back gradually until I got the right handle depth. And after that, it just needed a bit of hand sanding, and then you get a really nice inset minimalist door handle. I installed Brusso scissor hinges, which I was really impressed with. They were very expensive, and that might just be because of the import fees. But for fine furniture, they were the perfect choice. Each leaf was 5mm thick, which is amazing, and I'm not sure if any other company is doing that. And my client did want an antique tarnish look, so I did tarnish these hinges in some vinegar, which just took off the glossy coating and made them look a bit weathered. To finish the piece, I used Rubio Monocoat Pure. I did do a test sample before in walnut colour, which I thought would richen the grain even more. However, I found the pigment too dark, and where I think that would work really well is if you had a very light piece of walnut, maybe with a lot of sap on it, it would darken it then to look like a rich walnut colour. But for this piece, the walnut was already a really nice rich colour and it just made it too black. So Pure was the perfect option. And once that was cured, I added Sheen Plus on top, which gave a really nice satin look to the piece. So all that's left to do now is screw the doors in place and take some nice pictures. If you're interested in commissioning a piece of furniture, then please head over to my website, a link will be in the description down below, and get in touch there. And if you're a woodworker yourself, I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe learned something. Thank you for sticking to the end and supporting the channel, and I'll see you very soon for the next video.